Hey everyone, this is April Garwood from Banana Moon Studio. I have a new beginner level crochet pattern that's going to be out shortly, and I wanted to walk you through this pattern so that those of you who are very new to crochet will have a little bit of help. So the introductory information, this is a beginner level pattern. Your finished scarf should be about 8 inches wide and 70 inches around. And sorry, I ran out of ink here. You can see the scarf's color better here. It's wrapped double in this picture, so that's why it probably doesn't look 70 inches around. I used We Crochet Chroma worsted yarn. And if you are looking at this pattern on a device, you'll be able to click where you can purchase that yarn. The yarn is a combination of wool and nylon. Each ball of the yarn should be 198 yards, weigh 100 grams, and it's yarn weight category for worsted or medium. So this is not the yarn label for this yarn, but as you look at a yarn label, you're looking for a symbol like this that has a 4 on it, or perhaps on the label the words worsted or medium weight. The crochet hook size you'll be using is an L. The letters are US sizes. If you want to be really sure you've got the right size, go by the metric measurement, which is 7 millimeters. Or if this size of hook isn't giving you the right size of stitches, you might need to change your hook size in order to get the correct gauge or stitch size. You'll also need a tapestry needle for weaving in your ends. That's one of these. It has a large eye for yarn and a fairly blunt tip. This information about gauge tells you that as you are looking at your scarf, sorry, that's shaking the camera. If you measure across, 4 inches should be about 12 stitches, and 4 inches this way should be about 9 rows. It is okay if it's not exact, but the closer to that gauge you get, the more likely you are to get a scarf that has the correct measurements when you're finished. Okay, again, if you're looking at this pattern on a device, there are some links here you can click to helpful resources. So we're going to jump into the scarf now. It says first to chain 25. That's what the CH25 means. You will need to chain 25. I'm going to chain less just so that this demo piece I'm making will be not quite so wide. So we start, let me go through that again. We start with a slip knot. You'll bring your yarn like so, making a loop in this end, and then bring the tail up behind that, and then you'll pull this way. That's how you'll make a slip knot. Your yarn end here should always be 4 to 6 inches long so that you have plenty to weave in. That helps make sure your project doesn't come undone. So instead of chaining 25, I'm going to chain 11. That's just so that this will make this demo a little bit quicker. All right, I've chained 11. The loop on the hook does not count as a chain. Next, the pattern says single crochet in second chain from hook and each remaining chain, and then turn. All right, as you look at your chains, this side kind of looks a little like a braid. I like to turn it over and go into the loops that you see along the back, these kind of ones that are sort of making a dashed line along the back. So I'm supposed to single crochet into the second chain for my hook. The first one is here, and I'm going to skip it. The second one is here, so I'll go under this loop, yarn across the front of my hook, pull it through the chain, yarn around, or yarn over is what we call this, and then pull that through both loops. And then I'll go under the next bottom ridge loop, yarn across the front of my hook, pull that through the chain, yarn over, pull that through 2 loops. I'm going to do that all the way across my chain. Of course, if you're making the scarf, you will have more than I will, since I made my chain shorter. I've completed my first row of single crochet. I should have done this earlier. When you finish making your first single crochet stitch, I recommend placing a stitch marker in it. Since you are new to crochet, that will help you make sure you are not adding or losing stitches at the ends of your rows. Our next row, row 2, chain 1, half double crochet in each stitch across, and then turn. So this is where I was when I completed row 1. To turn it is going to be to bring it this way so that I'm ready to work across it again. Half double crochet stitch, well actually first, chain 1, that was the beginning. All right, half double crochet stitch begins by yarning over and then going into the top of the stitch. If I kind of turn my piece this way, you can see how there's like this column of stacked V's. You need to go under both sides of the V, and you can't really see it from the side, but there's kind of this little valley. That's where your hook is going to go in. Just make sure, turn it if you need to, make sure it goes under both loops. Then I'll bring the yarn across the front of my hook, pull that through the stitch, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. Again, I'll yarn over, go into this little valley under both loops of my V, yarn across the front of my hook, pull it through the stitch, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. That is the half double crochet stitch. You're going to do that all the way across. Once you've gotten all the way across to your last stitch, you're going to see your stitch marker here. That's the last stitch. You can also count your stitches. I find it easier to count the tops because their V's are really easy to see, to help you make sure that you're getting the right number of stitches. When you're ready to stitch into the last one, you'll take that stitch marker out, yarn over, go under that last set of loops, yarn over the front of your hook, pull that through, yarn over, and through all 3 loops. And that finishes my second row. Row 3, chain 2, double crochet in each stitch across, and then turn. I keep forgetting to put my stitch marker in my first stitch. You do better than me and put those stitch markers in as soon as you finish the first stitch of each row, because that will help you make sure you know where to find it later. Okay, so turning brings me to here. I'm going to chain 2 this time. And the double crochet stitch also begins with a yarn over. Again, I'll go under both sides of that V, yarn across the front of my hook, pull that through the stitch, yarn over. This time we're going to pull just through 2 loops, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops again. That's the double crochet stitch. Again, we yarn over, we go into the next stitch under both sides, both loops, yarn across the front of the hook, pull that through the stitch, yarn over, through 2 loops, yarn over and through 2 loops. And we'll do that in every stitch across. Oh, I forgot to mark my first stitch again. Let's do that now. Eventually, when you are very comfortable crocheting, you won't need to mark those stitches anymore because you'll just be able to see where they are. But it is a really good tip for beginners to mark the first stitch of each row, because when you're new to it, it can be hard to tell where you should place your last stitch. Now I am at my marked stitch, so I'll take my stitch marker out, yarn over, and I have one more stitch to place right here. And then turn brings me to here. Row 4, chain 1, single crochet in each stitch across, and then turn. All right, we already did a single crochet row, but we start with a chain 1. We go under both loops of that stitch, yarn across the front of your hook, pull it through the stitch, yarn over and pull it through both loops, and then mark your stitch. I did it right that time. Okay, now we're going to single crochet across. This is the same stitch that we did in the first row, but now we're working it into stitches instead of into chains. Now I'm at my marked stitch, so I'll take my stitch marker out, place my final stitch here, and then I'm ready to turn, which brings me to here. So let's see what this says next. After that row 4, it says repeat rows 2 through 4 for pattern. And what that means is that we're just going to go through and repeat these rows over and over and over. So my next row is going to be row 2, or a repeat of row 2. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to half double crochet in every stitch for my next row. Then I'll go and I'll do double crochet in each stitch across. Then I'll do single crochet in every stitch across, and then I'll go back and start over again. So you're going to repeat these 3 rows over and over and over until, so this says, you know, my pattern is to repeat these 3 rows over and over. Then I'm going to work in that pattern for a total of 150 rows, and then I will be finished. So you're just going to repeat those rows over and over until you have completed 150 rows. You can use, in order to keep track of those rows, it may be difficult for you if you're a beginner to count rows just by looking at your piece. There is 1 row here, there's 1 here, 1 here, and 1 across the top. That may be hard for you to see, but you can kind of see rows of similar texture, how the loops all look the same here. They all look the same here and here. But if counting your rows looking at your piece is difficult, there are a couple of other things you could do to help you. First of all, you know that the scarf is supposed to be about 70 inches long when it's finished. So you could just measure until you get to 70 inches. The one issue with that is that crochet fabric stretches a lot. So just depending on how much you've stretched it, you may or may not be at the right number of rows. Another thing that could help you here is that the finished scarf takes almost exactly 2 balls of this We Crochet Chroma worsted yarn. So if you're using this exact yarn, just keep going until you've used all of it. Okay, so that's another option. Another way you can keep track of rows is just by making tally marks on your pattern or writing numbers on your pattern. Every time you complete a row, you might write a number or you might make a tally mark. You can also get apps that are made to count rows for you, where you just have to tap a button every time you finish a row, or you can even use the calculator on your phone to just add one every time you finish a row. So those are some options for keeping track of your rows. I'm going to come back in a minute and show you how you're going to seam the scarf once you have completed everything. So I have this rectangular piece that I've made here, and what I want to do is seam the two ends together to make it into like a ring. So I finished my last row here. I'm going to turn this way so I'm ready to work across, and I'm going to bring the beginning end up behind the edge that I've been working on. So now I'm ready to start seaming. So I'll start by chaining one, and then I'll go under both loops of the first stitch of this working edge, and then under both loops of this, which is one of my foundation chains. And the yarn will just come across the front of my hook. I'll pull that through both the chain and the stitch and through the loop on my hook, and that makes one slip stitch. So I'll continue that across, going under the loops of the stitches and the chains and slip stitching all the way across. And here's my last slip stitch to make this seam. And so now I've slip stitched all the way across, and you can see the two ends are secured. So I will fasten off by cutting my tail 4 to 6 inches long, so I have plenty to weave in. That keeps my project secure. I'll yarn over the hook one more time and pull that through, and just pull the hook to pull that end all the way through, pull it snug. And then when I turn this way with the seam on the inside, then my piece is right side out and the seam is right here. So that is how you seam two ends of your crochet piece together.